Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Thursday's issue of ICB TV. I'm Garry Carter, for those of you who don't know me, and it's been my pleasure to be here for, I think, probably 25 of these things now. We're having great fun meeting you virtually, and I am very pleased that today I've got some absolutely fantastic guests so that you don't just have to listen to me. We've got Paula Veysey-Smith with us. As many of you will know, she's the chair of our council. Very important lady, very powerful. And she is with us today, having just hot-footed it over from doing her presentation this morning on marketing your practice in uncertain times. Hi, Paula. Good title for uncertain times, I believe.
Well, probably the most uncertain times I can remember in my lifetime. I think we'll all look back and go, do you remember the COVID-19 crisis? And the other thing I think is quite important is how quickly it all happened. We almost went from normal to a state of lockdown in 48 hours. You know, for those of you who've listened to what I've said, I think the basic tenets of marketing remain the same, although you might have to look at how you're doing it. So, you know, hopefully for those who've had a chance to look at my presentation, it's been helpful and available for any questions. And even if you haven't watched it and you're thinking of things, you know, do put your questions up.
Brilliant, great. I was talking to a member we have in Israel recently, and he was saying, you've got no problems. He said, my office has a shrapnel hole in my wall, and it's about a foot square. So he said, you know, we have to put up with all sorts of stuff as well. In addition to that, today, our second presentation was from Clare Mannall, and Claire has been talking to us recently about how she runs her practice, systemizes it so she knows what she's doing, and we are going to be doing some work with Claire and release it sometime later this year, some sort of joint project. But Claire, hello.
Hi.
Hi, you're coming to us from a pod in the garden.
Absolutely, this is my cabin office in the garden, which is normally lovely, but today has been pelting with rain, so it's a little bit noisy.
Yeah, well, I've just been sitting here, and the lightning has been flashing here, and the rumbles of thunder and everything else. So, on the basis they always say any port in a storm, I am delighted that today we have with us Tom Port from AutoEntry. Tom, hi, how are you?
Hi, Garry. Yes, very, very good. Yes, delighted to be chatting to all the members. It's been a while since I've been at an ICB event, actually, you know, relocating to Arizona and everything. So I'm hopefully some of the attendees will be, I'll be a familiar face too. So yeah, delighted to have a chat with you guys today.
So are you actually in Arizona now?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So
what time is it in Arizona then?
It is 7 o'clock in the morning.
Well, thank you for getting up early. When our members, obviously, it's
I've heard something. Yes, I've heard something about early birds catching worms. So I thought, why not?
It's very strange to talk to somebody from AutoEntry that hasn't got a Southern Irish lilt. But anyway,
yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was the lone British person when we first started the company about 8 years ago. So yes,
am I right in saying you were the second person to join? So did you and Brendan set this up together or something?
So I first met Brendan 10 years ago in a Dublin city centre apartment when Brendan was first coming up with the original ideas for AutoEntry. And he roped me into sort of working with them from the kitchen table. And we took a product to market. We sold it to about 100 accountants. And after that, come 2012, we went away, said this is something that's really going to deliver value for bookkeepers and accountants. And raised a bit of seed funding as software companies do. And I moved back to the United Kingdom and started taking the product to market in the UK, which of course, as you know, we all know is AutoEntry's dominant market now.
Yeah. So do you find that obviously there are other similar products available? I mean, our members would suggest yours is the best because they keep voting you to get a Luca Award, so that's got to be good.
Yes.
Do you find it's useful to have somebody else in the market rather than you trying to absolutely recreate the wheel? Create the wheel from nothing.
Yeah, 100%. I'm a firm believer in competition because the reality is that competition is not only good for the consumer, it's also good for the company, i.e. AutoEntry and our good friends in Orange over at Receipt Bank, and HubDoc as well, of course. But it keeps us on our toes. Yeah. Whenever Receipt Bank are looking to add functionality and add value to the market, AutoEntry is doing the same thing. You know, we're remaining trying to remain as competitive as possible at all times. So ultimately, the guys that win are everyone on this call.
Great, fantastic. And Amy, you're with us again today, anchoring.
Also, my kids are here. I don't know if that's coming through, but they're outside having fun, let's say. But yes, I'm here, happy to be here again.
A COVID consequence. It's okay. We'll duck out. Are you going to be fielding the questions, or should I just read them through, or which is the best way to go?
I think it'll blow over. So yes, I'll be here.
Okay, great. So, Paula, you were saying this morning that running a practice in uncertain times, and these are the most uncertain times ever. But what are your key messages to our members for this?
Well, the key messages are: do continue marketing. Don't feel that because it's uncertain, because they're tough times. And one of the points made in my presentation is differentiating marketing to hard selling. So some people might sort of shy away from them. Then now's not the time to be knocking on the doors. But marketing's not about that. It's about your market presence, knowing what your market is. So do consider and do continue doing that. I mean, I've used this time to take my website down and redevelop it. Massive mistake, because I thought I would have some free time, and that's the last thing that's happened. But fingers crossed, website's coming back. The new improved Empower website is coming back tomorrow. Be positive. Be very, very positive. I get up some days and the dark clouds are there. And I really just think, well, but first of all, I think, what day is it? Because I completely lose track of what day it is, because every day seems to be roughly the same. But, continue being positive. And ultimately always take care of yourselves. But now is the time to market. I've had 2 or 3 new client inquiries already. I know some other people have said that. And also, if you do have some free time, then it is a chance to review where you're at with your business and review what you want to do with it, review what your market is, and look at things you could do.
Yeah, well, you've actually ruined my next question, which was going to be, what do you think the difference is between selling and marketing? So what I'll do, I'll go straight, I'll go back down to Tom and say, software companies are very often accused of being very, very pushy. How do you get across to somebody that you've got a product that they really need and what it's for, without having to twist their arm to buy 1,000 licenses in one batch or something?
Yeah, a really good question, because I think, if we're AutoEntry as a company are honest with ourselves, way back when our first iteration of our first software we released, back in 2012, we were so desperate to grow the company and grow the product and the user base that we did anything we could to acquire customers. And that meant, calling people, and perhaps people did, that wasn't the best strategy. I think how we need to approach it is that there's hard selling, as Paula referred to, and then there's kind of solution selling, yeah? And what AutoEntry colleagues focus on now is, how can we display as much value as possible for the end user? Because what we find is, when we have a clear understanding of what our customers want, and our colleagues can present that to them, it's not a hard sell anymore. All it is it's just having a reasonable conversation and saying, does this give you value? If the answer is yes, we've got a match there. Let's perhaps get you set up on a trial and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think that is it's the side of selling which I think people sometimes miss, but it is the good side. I mean, I've been selling since I left school, basically, but I could never twist anybody's back. So I probably lost a few sales where I wasn't pushy enough, but I always felt happy going home at night that I'd had a good day and I hadn't sent anybody away feeling really glum because they bought my product. Claire, you've done a fair bit in your past history. You've been in catering, hotel catering. You've done a lot of training. I think you've mentioned you trained the army at one stage and various things. Now the thing is, our really top bookkeepers like you, to me, are selling every time we see you, but very subtly. It's pushing you and what you have to offer, and it's getting across that personality, isn't it? Do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, one of the things I found was that when I decided to go down this route, you're right, I've been teaching for about 13 years, hospitality students, and within that, a number of groups, in fact, of army students that we've been doing online. But taking a big leap of faith to go and do plan B, and you do all your exams and you get your practice license, and then you're feeling like, what now? What do I do? How do I get a client? And it's an absolute minefield. And I think some people go in for the hard sell, and I'm really not very good at that. And I think that's a good thing. That's why my clients like me. But I found it was about building a relationship with people over time. So I went to a couple of quite soft networking things locally, and found that just over a period of perhaps 18 months, I started to get to know people, and they started to realize I kind of knew what I was doing. And in the background, I was gaining clients through other routes, particularly the ICB jobs board. So I was learning all the time, and practicing and engaging. And then through the local networking, I started to find that people were going, oh, actually, Claire's a bookkeeper. I do need one now, and I've really got to know her. And that's how it came about. And then, of course, you get your first client, and then they tell other people what you do, and that, you know, you sort of helping them out and saving them from a minefield of chaotic finance stuff. And that comes about. So I still really I still go to networking, but I don't tend to go there to do it as a hard sell. I tend to go to see work friends, colleagues, you know, people that have different strands to their businesses. And along the way, people start to get to know you, and they just keep you in mind. So they either then, for their own benefit of wanting a bookkeeper, or know someone else starts talking about wanting a bookkeeper, and then before you know it, you're their choice because you've made a relationship with them, a friendship, a bond somewhere along the way. And that's really how my practice has built, particularly over the last 3 years, I would say. But I think you have to persevere. It did take a while to get in with the crowd, in a way. I would say I'm a churchgoer, and I think if you ever start going to a new church, it's a bit like that. And I was used to say, a bit like going to church or going into a new workplace. It just takes a while to get to be known.
I think it is. And that's it. And I think a lot of our members are very lucky. They go straight into their first client, mainly because it's somebody they knew and therefore decided to take up bookkeeping, or it's somebody that they talked to in a pub and, oh, you're a bookkeeper, I need my bookkeeping. Before you know what they're doing, they've started. But then moving it up to getting to 5, 25, 55, or however, that's when the planning comes in. And this is when we're going to be, I'll talk to you in a second about the sort of the systems that we need to bring in, etc. But yesterday I was on a panel with a group of international accountants being interviewed by a man called Rob Brown, who I first met at Accountex last year, and he interviewed me about bookkeepers. And I think he thought we were very strange people because he'd always been with accountants, and he didn't really understand why bookkeepers were necessary, because surely it's just the accountant stuff. And nowadays everything done electronically and everything else. But I think the one thing that came across yesterday was we're about 3 years ahead of the loop in automating. And I think bookkeepers about 5 years ago started taking to automation because it was a no-brainer, basically. It just made our life simpler. Whereas I think at the moment, a lot of accountants seem to be playing catch-up, and certainly some of the groups yesterday are playing catch-up because now they see it as a necessity. And I think that's where we are. I mean, Tom, you must have noticed this. I mean, if it wasn't for AI and everything else, you wouldn't be here, presumably. But I think bookkeepers have been very, very quick to take up the cloud, as it was called.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think there's reasons for it. You know, a lot of the bookkeepers and the bookkeeping firms that we've worked with historically, we see them as quite sort of nimble organizations, for want of a better phrase, in as far, and contrasting that with some accounting firms, they can kind of be like ships to turn around, if you will. So it's, you know, not only you having to speak to the partner in an accounting firm to really sow the seed and do that mindset set shift, that can, you know, that's that's somewhat challenging, of course. But with bookkeepers we worked with before, as I said, it's that sort of nimble mentality that has allowed them to adopt technology arguably better.
If I can jump in on that, I think that's a very good point. And I think one of the reasons that we can do that is because we have so much more contact with our clients, that actually clients come to us and they go, have you heard about this new product? you know, this, well, I'd like to look at this, or my friends told me that, because we're there all the time. And I remember starting off with one of the cloud providers. I'm not going to say which one, because I don't want to seem like I'm showing favoritism. I'm going to have a reputation for being a bit of a fire starter. Hopefully not a twisted fire starter, of course. But, you know, if I see something new, I'm like, oh, let's have a go at that. All my clients like that. Let's adopt that and see what happens.
Yeah. I think one of the bits that were in the discussion, the pre-air discussion yesterday, we were talking about accountants, and I said, well, I don't really know what you're worried about. You only ever see your clients once a year. Just put it back 3 months. They were not very impressed. But anyway, it's one of those things. I mean, Claire, it's often said that the cobbler's wife is the one that does, you know, has holes in her shoes, because nobody's got time to look after their own people. What I find with a lot of the practices that we have, that you look after your business, your clients first, and then you almost neglect your own business completely. And the systems that you are wanting or suggesting we should all bring in, that's to try and get around that problem, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things is I spent probably the first 3 years working out what the hell I was doing, actually, and then kind of setting up checklists. And every time I had a new client, I had a new checklist, and they've all got a slightly different way of doing things. The one thing I did do early on, just going back to the automation topic, was that I suppose I started around the time automation came into place. So actually, I picked up with it straight away, because I thought, well, actually, I don't want to be manually inputting invoices the whole time. It's got to be a better use of my time. But yeah, so I spent a lot of my time constantly worrying that I'd done everything I thought I was going to be doing for my client, or that I was forgetting something. And for me, I chose to go solo rather than go and work for someone else first, and perhaps make my own mistakes under their guidance. I decided to make my own mistakes and take full flack for it. And with that, so you learn quite a lot by error, as well as not by error. But that led on to then this idea of checklists and things like that. And then I got to a place where we were just talking a bit earlier before we started the live presentation about, and Paula mentioned it in her presentation as well, about fail-safing your business. You know, you've only got to lose one biggish client, and you then, you know, where are you? And for me, I'm the only breadwinner in my household. So, you know, if I don't earn, the mortgage isn't going to get paid. So I got to a point where I lost a big client, and thankfully I made up that business and more quite quickly. But it did lead me to think, you know, how exposed am I to those big clients that we get? And therefore, how do I need to go about fail-safe in my business? So, and I'd already started to think a bit about systems, and I had some systems in place, but then you start training up bookkeepers to do things the way you think you would like things to be done. And you start to realise you need a system of checking, and a system of showing people how to do something, so that you've got a sort of training manual that people can, you know, fundamentally almost take off the shelf and do the job. And then a way of being able to check where they're at with things and where they're up to with the job.
Yeah, I think this is why we're talking to you about doing something, you know, with the ICB badge on it, because our members, whatever it is we ask them to do, they want a template. And whilst I'm mentioning something on air over the last couple of days, I can see the numbers rattling up, because will there be a template? Where is it on the website? Can I have it now? So yeah, but that's the way it works. I mean, I've got some interesting figures here, which I think just sort of prove how successful our members are being. In 2018, our members added 8,476 clients. In 2019, 10,905. And so far, since the beginning of March, 3,253 new clients. Now, that just goes to show that we are really, really important to people. So for that to be happening in what we've got to say was potentially a real downturn, what it's going to be like when we come out of this and the businesses really start to kick again, you know, but look at that. That's what, 18, 19, 21, 22, just short of 23,000 clients in 3 years. So I can see Tom looking very envious at that. But
That is incredible. Like, I'm trying to put this into my world in the context of a software company, and that being said, a high rate growing software company, high growth rate software company rather. Where any company would be jealous of those kind of figures. So it just proves the need that the bookkeeper is pivotal to assisting businesses making good decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's already been alluded to. We have a slightly different relationships to accountants, and that's not having a dig at accountants. It's the way they're taught to do things. Their aim is to sort out the year-end compliance, and there's obviously a place for that. Although increasingly our members are doing their own compliance with FRS 105 and 102 now as well. But yeah, I mean, the ladies will probably tell me actual figures, but the last time we did a survey, most of our members saw their clients at least monthly, and I think it worked out at 1.3 visits per month for the average client. So that's 11 straight away, 11 or 12 more visits than the average accountant has. So if the accountant really wants to know what's going on in a business, really they should work with bookkeepers, not try and send in. I think what too many do, and I've come across this in the past when I used one of the big four companies, actually for the institute, big five companies, sorry. We found that they didn't really know what we were about, and they didn't get under the skin of what we were doing. And one of the reasons we set up ICB was because we couldn't find qualified trained bookkeepers, because everybody wanted to be an accountant. So we could get a part qualified accountant who was really bored of having to do the day-to-day bookkeeping, and therefore they didn't do it very well. And you know, they made so many errors and mistakes that now we've got this complete army of bookkeepers just sitting out there, running around out there, waiting to take it up. Amy, how are we doing on questions? I haven't been keeping an eye on the numbers. Have we got anything?
Very well. Well, Kevin Jarvis has a sort of systematizing question, Claire. I mean, what he's saying is that he is trying very hard to systematize the business, and he's trying to expand to multiple sites. But the biggest problem is time. He says he's got brilliant staff, but he's struggling to let go of certain jobs. So I don't know if you've got any advice for Kevin.
I'm not sure I've got any advice, except to say I'm with you on that one. I mean, it took us a year to systematize our business, and actually just behind me I have the file. Wait for everything about to fall down. This is the file of sort of systems that we have. It's actually electronic as well. But even within it, I don't know, whether you've listened to my presentation yet, Kevin, I've said that I've still got to do checklists. I've still got reminders I need to set up. And as you rightly say, it's having time. And I think we've all found the last 6 weeks, we've been rammed with advising clients, supporting them, helping them through cash flow, helping them through furlough, helping them through job retention scheme applications, and all those elements that, and I suddenly thought, I might actually have time to, things are starting to quieten down a little bit for me. I don't know about anyone else, but so my hope is that in the next month I can actually get the checklists and reminders elements set up. But you're absolutely right. And also, it's quite hard. One of the things I've found as well, having taken on a couple of bookkeepers last year, is it's quite hard to let go of your work to people. You need to, but it's quite hard to. And there's a trust element in that, and there's a hope, and it's going to be okay. And I think you just have to trust the people you took on. And I've always been a real believer in leadership terms of empowering people. So empower people, let them, work with them. If they make a mistake, support them and guide them through making sure it doesn't happen again.
I don't know if you caught the comment at the end of my presentation yesterday, because I had to go off. And Amy jumped into the chair and said, I thought this moment would never happen. So, I've had to prise her back out of it today. I mean, we do enjoy what we do, don't we? That is the thing. We don't do this for the money, stupid as we are, but we're there because we actually enjoy the people. We can pick and choose our clients to within certain reason. And yeah, we can get involved with 20, 30, 40 different industries, professions, and it's interesting stuff. And I think the other thing is that one of the things that we've tried to say right from day one is, you're all doing a brilliant job. Without you, lots of people would be struggling. They wouldn't be getting their businesses on the footing that they're on. So yeah, it's very difficult I suppose it's like the kids leaving home. You know, when you get to a certain age, you feel completely lost without doing your work.
I think
Sorry, Amy, anyone?
if I can
sorry.
just pick up on 2 points of Claire's is one, delegation's a really, really difficult art, because I think you kind of delegate, but you want them to do it exactly the same as you do it. Now, they might do it differently, as long as, of course, they're doing it properly, and actually giving people room to do it their way rather than your way, with you overseeing it, can cause cause crisis, not crisis, but a bit of anxiety. And in terms of don't have enough time, one of the things I found when I've put systems into my business and when I do my marketing is you have to build time to say work on the business rather than in the business, and it is a bit of something that you have to learn. And almost when I first started doing it, I'd take myself completely away from a business like my office or my home office and sit there and look at the things I needed to do to work on my business, because all the time you're in the office you just get sucked back into doing things. So it is kind of a mindset that just says, right, no, you know, I know I've got all these things to do, but for this afternoon, I'm going to look at this specific area because I know it's going to build my business and get these things done.
I love what you say there, Paula, about working, you know, on your business. And I think that's really important for anyone to be aware of, because as I've always sort of looked at, you know, there's motion, and there's going through the motions and doing what you need to do. And then there's also the action side of that as well. And as Claire alluded to earlier, you know, sometimes it's uncomfortable for people to go to these networking events and try and get out there, market yourself, your own personal brand. But I think it's really important. You know, I think everyone should do it. And the first couple of times that you do it, you just see that the next time it becomes exponentially easier to do.
I think going back, Tom, on what I said earlier about how do software companies get over the fact that they want us to buy their software, but they need also to build the relationships. I mean, I presume that if you had the sort of relationship with us that each one of those 10,903 clients was just added to the list of licenses, that would be good. Obviously, you'd quite like that. And it's a question of, you know, you are building up quite a relationship with ICB, which is good. And therefore, we need to make sure that runs along smoothly. And there isn't any of this arm behind back stuff that goes. No. I mean, the other thing I remember is Summit 4 or 5 years ago, the other big orange thing that you mentioned a little while back, their co-founder got up on stage and says, bookkeepers are dead. Bloody silly thing to say to an audience of bookkeepers.
Pick your battles, mate. Yeah.
So anyway, he wasn't invited back for another couple of years. And I think now the whole thing has changed. People are important. And I don't think this profession is yet ready to become totally automated. It is automation as a tool, not as the front-facing element of what we do. What we do is far too important because of the personal relationships. I think you're all nodding there. Good.
Totally agree with that. Yeah, and just, you know, going back to that, you know, about the arm behind the back thing, it's, you know, software companies need to move away from that. Yeah, and how I instruct our sales teams all over the world now is that we're not a sales team in as far as we're going to be phoning you and trying to, you know, aggressively have that conversation with you. What I want to see our sales team do, and when our sales managers in the various territories do even their demo reviews, we want to make sure that our colleagues are enabling. Yeah. So creating that relationship, talking them through the process, and making sure that this is a fit for their business, for their practice, before doing any kind of implementation.
Well, can I ask Paula and Claire then, what is it that makes you buy a product from Tom or from anybody else? Because you're getting bombarded with, I mean, more apps than it makes sense. But what is it that clicks your button, dare I say that?
Okay, I'll go first. First of all, it's fit with existing software. So, you know, looking at what we've already got in place, looking at how it works. And I agree with what you've just said. There is just so much apps and software that you can utilize now. And we use AutoEntry, actually, as part of our practice, along with another one, which isn't orange, but I'm not going to say anything else. So first of all, I look at fit. And secondly, I'd also look at customer demand. And what do my clients want? What's going to work for them? Because, you know, something might work better for them than something else. We're not a practice built on just certain software. I could call myself a software tart. If it works, I'll use it and integrate it into my practice. So I think they're the two things. And to always be aware of what's available. So don't think, right, got it all sorted, so I'm not going to look, because business changes, things change, and it's always good to keep an open mind on how something will work for you. And I think Claire, did you notice that nice segue there? That was good. Is using some software that I'm quite interested to develop into my practice, which is more to do with the cash flow side of stuff. So, you know, it's keeping an eye on also what's available and what you think's going to help your clients, but also make you stand out to your clients.
So Claire, the problem is that we've already said that we have little time to look after our own business because, you know, everybody else is taking up our time. You're trying to persuade them now that systemizing is the way to go ahead. And whilst they're doing all of this, on top of that, you want them to look at 135 apps a week that have just been released. So what is it that does it for you? How do you make that decision?
Well, I have to be honest, I can't bear anything worse than looking at a computer screen all day long, but I spend a lot of time doing that. So come the evenings, I'm not very good at my research. A couple of things I would say, slightly go back a conversation or so, but lead into some other thoughts. With your practice, when you're billing, which I'm not really going to get down that route, but often we're very good at billing for the hours we work, but I'm a real believer you need to build in the hours it takes you to run your business, because running your business is an important part of looking after your clients. So I reckon for every 8-hour day, 2 hours of that is probably about running CEM and keeping up to date with software, keeping up to date with my training, keeping up to date with my ICB requirements, and goodness knows what else, and probably it's more time than that. So I think that's quite important firstly. In terms of how I went about choosing software, which sort of leads into that, is what worked for me really initially. I'm afraid I don't use AutoEntry, and I do use something else, but they're starting to price themselves quite highly, and at the moment I've got to look at some cost areas, so I'm looking at some other options for automation. But once you introduce it to a client, they absolutely love it. I find the automation, and then if they know they're going to get some other time out of you to do other things. So I find that in the time spent automating, I can then actually talk to a client around reports and management accounts, and I can talk to them about cash flow. So I guess what I look for in software, for me, it's got to be really clear and plain and simple and time saving. I do specialize down one particular route with accounting software and with automation, but I'm not adverse to using others, and I certainly don't exclude a potential client because of that. And I think that's quite important, because once they've bought into you and believe in you, if you still want to, you can then transfer them across to other software. But if you really want a client, you need to be a software tart, as Paula put it so beautifully.
But I think the point you make about pricing for the other things that you do, a lot of people don't think about that. And I mean, we have a lot of new starters with us who just get their practice license and say, well, I'm traveling to clients all over the place, so I'm earning money from them, but I'm wasting all my money on petrol. I said, yeah, but that's got to be built into what you do. Otherwise, it's a bit like Mars Bar saying you're going to sell it for the price of the contents. And that isn't what they do. You have to build in the cost of the factory, the production unit, everybody that's there, the marketing. It's all got to become part of a package. I think Paula's marketing push and various other things that work on, it's got to be an increasing focus on what we're going to be doing for the remainder of this year during the move towards the opening up of the world again, and then hopefully by the end of, who knows, end of this year, beginning of next year, when things are looking a little bit more normal, I think we need to concentrate far more on let's run your business, let's get you doing that properly. And then, you know, there's so many clients out there, 11,000 a year almost, you know, that's not the main concern now. It's making sure you're in a position to get those clients, and that's important. Amy,
that was, sorry, I've just jumped in again. That I know, right. It's good jump in when you get a second. I mean, that was very much also a tenet of what I said, is getting yourself in position to take these clients on. And I want to go back to one of Claire's points, where I think it's absolutely vital, is depending on how you do it, but your pricing, you know, what is your hourly rate, or if you use a different pricing model, is also understanding, you know, you've got your subscriptions to pay, you've got your AML to do, you know, you're building into your business. Bookkeepers need to realize their value. So the sort of the £12, £15 an hour, they have to go. And I had a client inquiry a couple of days ago, and I gave out my rate, and I mean, it was over the phone. I think she fell off a chair because I heard a thud. And then she said, "Oh, I suppose you have to charge that much because you run a business." I went, "No, I charge that much because that is the value of a properly professional, regulated bookkeeper." So you know, we've got to get the message out there to clients as well.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point there. Amy, how are we doing on questions?
Yeah, very well. I mean, on the subject of making those decisions about which software to use, Susanna Williams says she's a self-employed farm secretary. Obviously, we supervise the Institute of Agricultural Secretaries and Administrators, so we've got quite a few farm secretaries. She's currently using Landmark Key Prime software for all her clients, and she's wondering, Tom, how she gets a webinar or a demo to find out how it works. And if it will
that is absolutely wonderful, Suzanne. I believe we have a link through you guys, the link with the ICB.
Yeah.
You can sign up. So yes, I'm sure that'll be shared somewhere in when this webinar goes out, or alternatively in the Q&A section. Follow that link, and Suzanne, you'll be able to get a demonstration there. But actually, it's an interesting point just with regards to sort of choosing software and picking providers. And it's actually something I talked about in my presentation when that went live, is that I absolutely understand that in the industry at the moment, there is, you know, what I'm sort of terming as app fatigue, because some of the last trade shows that I went to, it was just overwhelming, the level of noise of all these apps saying, buy my stuff, where, you know, we're the best company since sliced bread. And again, there is a process to that. Yeah, there's a process to sitting back, you know, calmly looking at your practice, looking at what your business needs are, choosing your apps, going through an implementation that I talked about in my presentation. So I won't bore you with all the details now, but what I would say is that, you know, that there can be a process behind everything.
We haven't actually alluded to your presentation before. I mean, obviously, we were absolutely over the moon that you agreed to sponsor us again, even though you weren't going to get to meet our members face to face and see the colour of their eyes and what they were, whether they were nodding or shaking or whatever they were doing. But it's been absolutely brilliant. I mean, the take-up has been fantastic. We've actually reached more people than we have during the physical meetings, which I think is great. We've also picked up an audience of people who we've never seen them before. We don't know what they look like. They just use their institute, which they're fully entitled to do, as their professional body, and take out of it what they want. But they don't go to branch meetings. They don't come to various other things. So we've got a lot of new people, which is fantastic. What was the gist of your presentation?
Actually, funnily enough, it's what we were just talking about now. What I wanted to get across is that there is this, as I referred to it, app fatigue, and there's a huge amount of apps, you know, recommending to buy their solutions. And I think what I'm seeing bookkeepers, and, you know, by further extension, accountants, of course, is just getting confused at where to start. And what I try to do is, over the last 10 years that I've been working with AutoEntry, found some best practices for implementing software. But starting right from choosing choosing your apps, to picking your categories, to demoing the product, what questions you need to ask, to going through the trial period, and then further on from that, implementation. And you might look at the presentation and see, you know, none of this is rocket science. And the reason why you think that is because it absolutely isn't. You know, sometimes the beauty is in the really obvious stuff. But it's just making sure that before you look at any software company or any category of software, if you will, have a process you need to follow, because by following process, you'll get to a positive ending.
I think that's good advice. That's great. And I think we need to work more closely with you on that sort of guidance role, rather than just selling your product. The idea that you can assist, because I mean, you've been in the industry, as you say, for 10 years. You've been around a bit. You've been trying to bring in an app, so you know how it all works. And I know that there is an organisation that set itself up to look at apps, but I mean, they were charging something like £400 a month. And a lot of our members said, oh, why? That's, you know, that's a couple of clients to me. Why would I do that just for you to give me everything exactly as it was before, just in one portal, you know? And I think a lot of people look to the ICB and say, well, you're my institute, you tell me. So I think it's something we do it to a small extent, but I think we've got to do it more.
But also as well, you know, going back to that relationship generating from the software company's perspective, you know, when you're going through implementing any type of software and you're dealing with your account manager or your customer success manager, whoever it may be, you know, just have a conversation with them, because the reality is that a lot of these people, my colleagues, have been in the business for a long time, and they've seen how software is implemented successfully in accounting firms, and of course in bookkeeping firms as well. So just have a conversation with them, ask their advice, ask their opinion, because, you know, we're here to help.
Yeah, good.
Yes, great feedback on the Q&A for AutoEntry. Faye loves AutoEntry, and she's been using it since February 2019. Fantastic support on the web chat. And also, if you need to adjust the credit levels, it's very easy. So I presume that's, and the thing about AutoEntry, right, is that you don't have to get the huge package in the beginning. You add credits as and when you need them. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And I don't want to hijack this chat in any way, turn it into a big AutoEntry pitch, but that is wonderful feedback, Faye. I'm delighted to hear that. In particular, with regards to our customer support, we are very, very hot on customer support. So if you ever want to chat to one of my team, if it's past 6 o'clock in the evening and need support, the guys here in Arizona would be more than happy to jump on and help you as well. But to answer your question, Amy, yes, of course, it's the credit model. It allows for that flexibility for our users.
I think with the big software company, the mainstream software companies, I'm always a bit concerned when they talk about how many users they've got, whether it's actual users or whether it just reflects the number of licenses bought in packages. Because if you're buying 10 or 100 licenses on the basis that you might use them one day, they're not real users. You know, it seems to me there are more users than companies actually out there, so we have to be very careful. But
vanity metrics, as I've heard to it being referred to.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Vanity metrics, yes.
Oh,
so
right.
you say you've sold it to 50,000 companies, but only 5 are using it. So you know, there's a bit of a discrepancy there.
Vanity metrics. What about FAFI functionality? Lorraine Adams says, I've been using AutoEntry for years and I love it, but keep it simple, please. User permission settings are not clear nowadays and rather FAFI. What do you say?
I love that. And actually, no. And my colleagues that are watching this are going to be laughing, because they're going to have heard me say this phrase time and time again. Simple software scales. And what I mean by that is that it's our responsibility, it's AutoEntry's responsibility as a product to make sure that our product is as intuitive as possible for our users. So Faye, with regards to the user permissions, absolutely happy to take that feedback on and report it back to the team, and let's see if I can make it simpler.
I wonder if you know the answer to this question actually. So we've put throughout the Inspire Tour that ICB users and Inspire Tour attendees get a 10% discount through AutoEntry. Does that apply to new users?
Yes.
No, I don't mean that. I've asked that question wrong. I mean, sorry, does it apply to existing users?
I'll have to double check that. I didn't set up the ICB discount. Do you know, I wouldn't want to say, because I wouldn't want to get it wrong, but I can absolutely double check that. That's no problem.
I'm tempted to think it probably doesn't, but we'll do what we can.
We'll do what we can. Let's work together.
We'll do what we can. So Sandra, I presume she might be an AutoEntry person, has come back and said they're going to sort out a landmark systems demo. So that's exciting for our member. Somebody's asking about practice management software. So Andy's just wondering about whether you guys use any. He's particularly mentioned TaxFiler, who we also work with here at ICB, but they've released a sort of new practice management software. But so basically saying some things do everything, including accounts, VAT, corporation tax, but others just do management accounts and payroll.
I think, Paul, aren't you investing in that sort of thing at the moment? Aren't you looking?
Actually, Gary, I have to be honest that I'm currently not looking for practice management software because we've got systems set up, and the good old spreadsheet, can't beat it. And it's finding the software that meets the needs of your business. Now, I know some of my colleagues swear by it, but I think I've got the systems in place that I need without it. And I do use certain software. So we use, again, I've been very careful not to mention things by name, but I'm going to hideously fail now. I actually use TaxCalc because I use that for the business, and that to me provides a really good client database. But in terms of software that measures every 5 minutes I've spent on a client or workflow, we don't have that in place. And at the moment, I don't feel the need to put it into place. But being that software tart, as I've now openly admitted, and also being adventurous and looking at new things, I never say no. Never, what's the phrase? Never say no, or never say never. So, things change.
So we have a seagull lady and a tart. Now, Claire, what about you? You're the one with systems.
Well, do you know what? Embarrassingly, I have these systems, but as Paula said, I've got a spreadsheet or two, which I'm not 100% comfortable about, to be fair, because I think there's a bordering on some GDPR issues around having that spreadsheet. But I've looked at various practice management softwares, and a lot of them are really complex, and they're too complex. You spend all your time trying to work out how they work, and you can't actually then get on with what you need to do. So I have used TaxCalc. I'm currently using TaxFiler. I still don't find they do quite enough in terms of as a client database. But that
they tend to be very expensive as well, don't they? I think they're costed for an accountancy market, I think.
Yeah, and they can mount up a bit when you start, if you need to give access to your admin people for that, the others, it's the licenses and all that side of it just starts to really grow. So for me, it's still something. I'm looking at a software that was presented at our Surrey branch actually back pre-coronavirus. I can't remember if it was January or February. It feels like an eternity ago. And this chap used to be an accountant, and he set up a reminders software. Graham knows a little bit about it, and I'm trying to look at that as to whether that will actually do practice management, because one of my key things is I really want to build in a system by which I can remind my clients when to pay things. So, I mean, I'm as guilty as the next person. I always forget to pay my quarterly PAYE because it's quarterly. I know. I'm trying to get myself into a mechanism where I remember, but I think one of our duties is to remind our clients as well. I think that's a role we should take on board and part of my systemizing. So it's finding some software that can do all of that, and I'm really struggling to find something that does everything I need it to do. I'm at risk of using 3 or 4 different softwares to get everything to where I need it to be. So hence why the spreadsheet ends up coming in pretty handy. But as I say, I do want to.
Tom, most of the software companies, and even those that are now owned by banks, etc., seem to be trying to move into other areas. Everybody is treading on everybody else's toes with loans and credit cards and everything else. I mean, are you going to stay in your chunk of the market, or are you also going to open up to new things?
I mean, look, never say never. If you're asking me personally, do I necessarily agree with that, and do I necessarily think it's best for the market? I'd lean towards no. I don't think it's great that everyone wants to be all things to all men. What AutoEntry's ethos has always been about is that the customers that we serve, we want to deeply focus on the category that we specialize in and giving them as much value. So certainly in the near future, AutoEntry won't be adding anything sort of out of our sort of natural wheelhouse, if you will. But for good reason. I think we need to keep focusing on what we do best.
Amy.
Well, there was a systematizing question for Claire. Andy again saying, thank you very much for your presentation. So top points, he's watched it. Just wondering if there's a step in the process where you go back to ensure that your clients have approved the work that you've done, the VAT, for example, the accounts, obviously. Just wondering if, obviously, then you stop them pointing the finger at you if there's a liability for an inspection or anything like that.
I saw that question, actually. I was having a sneaky peek. So it is a really good question. And my one thing would be that of course you need your client's approval, but you also need to work out your individual clients. So if I waited for my clients to approve their VAT returns, they'd never get submitted on time for some of them. They trust me to do a job. I make sure I audit it. So because the other thing I find is if they do have a HMRC audit, guess who they call first, or guess who they refer the HMRC person to? Me.
Yeah.
So as long as I'm confident that that VAT return is correct and I've compared it with previous quarters, most of my clients are happy. I know the ones that want to see it first. I know the ones that just want it submitted, and then I let them know what it is. And in that process, I make sure that I've audited it, that I am satisfied that what we're submitting, if HMRC came back to us, is perfectly auditable and will be fine. And I think it's just about having the right relationship with your client. So he's right to bring that up, because you should be getting your client's approval. You know your client and you know how to work with that client. And if I was writing a VAT process for ICB, then I probably wouldn't include the fact that I would automatically submit for some of my clients. I would build in the fact that you do need to ask your client first. But as I say, I think it's about just knowing your clients and working with them, and making sure, I think one of our roles and responsibilities is to make sure it's auditable. So we do take responsibility anyway. So
are your systems equally valid for a multi-bookkeeper practice as they are for a single person practice? Does a single person really need all these processes?
I don't think they do necessarily. I think if you've got your own way of building a checklist, I think if you're a single person practice, having a checklist is perfect. And if that checklist covers 90% of what you do for a client, and then you can build in some individual elements for each individual client, because they've all got their own little way of doing certain things, I don't think you need the systems. I think the systems come in place more when you start to have any more than two of you, basically two or more of you. I think you need to start having some systems in place, because you need to have those standards about how to do things, because it only takes one maverick to come along and completely destroy what you do. Whereas if you've clearly laid out the way you like things done and the way you work, and then within that training process you've also shown them how that individual client works, then you're better covered for building your practice. But you're right. I think if it's one of you, I don't think you really need it. You might need a bit around onboarding a client or something like that, but that still comes back to being a checklist almost than a system.
And I suppose as well, when you're putting your COPE together, which for those of you who haven't heard of this, shame on you, but your continuation of practice engagement, the document that links you into somebody else should anything go wrong, although in this case, everybody's gone wrong at the same time, so it wouldn't have worked. But yeah, I mean, I think having a set of principles of how you run the business, how it runs, how you deal with your clients, to hand that over in short notice so that somebody can read it through and say, okay, that's great, I can take over as from tomorrow morning, that would certainly help, wouldn't it?
Definitely. And I think that's part of what you should be looking for when you're looking for a person to work with on your COPE. Anyway, you should be finding someone that's like-minded to you, that understands the way you do things. So I think getting someone just to tick it so that you can tick an ICB box is a really wrong move. I'm taking a bit of time. I still need to finalise mine. I think I found someone that would work. And in fact, I'm also putting my brother as a director on my books, very minor director, so that he can just oversee that process of a handover if it was needed. But he's not a bookkeeper, so I need someone that understands the way I work, understands my principles, understands the culture I've tried to generate within my business. You can't be 100%, and if you're not there to run your business and that, it's not going to matter in the grand scheme. But you just want to do right by your clients who have done right by you. Especially at times like this, the loyalty from my clients is incredibly valuable, and I want to make sure that loyalty is continued whether I'm here or not. So in terms of that COPE, just don't see it as a tick box exercise. Find out about who you're wanting to sign that document.
Yeah. I think it's one of the things that came out yesterday in the conversation I mentioned before with the accountants and a number of our members that I've been talking to. I think if bookkeepers go too far, they become accountants. And again, I'm being very disloyal to accountants, but you know, it's a different mindset. And I think if you lose the personal touch, then we risk not being as useful to our clients as perhaps they expect of us. And we can't sell them the basis of we're a bookkeeper and we're local and we're professional, we help you, we're always there for you, if we're not. And I think one or two people seem to have had a bit of a struggle over the last couple of weeks because they'd lost that contact. So it's much easier to say go away to a deputy or something rather than it is to the principal, you know. So you can go and put pressure on them a bit more. Amy, I'm aware we're getting through the time here. How are we doing on questions?
Yeah, we're good. Just two positive things to add, really, as we conclude. Miranda Cracknell-Burt has just been on the chat with AutoEntry and asked about a 10% discount for existing users. And Rory apparently said, great, and added it to her account. So
Miranda, yes, I was doing exactly the same thing. I messaged a colleague, and so yes, I can double confirm that is. My colleague Rory is totally correct. Yes.
We have just wiped 10% off your turnover in one.
Oh, there we go. What an achievement for a morning, eh?
Exactly, what an achievement. The collective voice of ICB there. Proud of people. Wonderful. And obviously the chat really is as responsive as you said it was.
Yes,
so good. And then just to say, Sue Raisin, who I think actually had to go because she's a busy bookkeeper, but before she went, she said, I love AutoEntry. I've been using it for 18 months and I would highly recommend it. She also says she's watched both Claire and Paula's presentations and she said they were really useful and provided much food for thought. So thank you so much. So there we go. And then I think that wraps it up really in terms of the Q&A.
I think it does. I mean, can I take a final message from each of you? Let's start with Paula, the tart lady. How are you? What message? I mean, you've now been part of Inspire for many years. This is the first time it's gone virtual, and I think people, even though this is virtual, even though we're not able to get together and have that nice chat over the fantastic lunches that we normally had over Inspire, it's still going down extremely well. And I mean, I was looking at last night's program, and I was sitting there just watching the numbers ramping up as to people who are taking it down and following it. What's your big message of the moment for our members, your fellow members?
Keep calm and carry on. Some of you, I mean, I was fortunate because we work virtually anyway, so business for me has continued pretty much as normal, and my clients generally are coping very well. I don't know what situations other bookkeepers are finding themselves in. Some of you might be struggling, some of you might have lost clients, some of you might be wondering about the way forward, but the big message is this is only temporary. A bit of a Boris Johnson thing, that, isn't it? This is only temporary and we will come out at the other side. There will be opportunity, and I really sincerely hope, because the summit's in November, that there's a chance that it can go ahead and we can all come back together again and give each other big hugs. But use also, tap into what the ICB are providing. I think Inspire, what a great thing to put on. Look how you've put it on. It's gone ahead. People have been able to engage with Inspire in a different way, and you're very much giving out the business as normal, and it is business as normal. So yeah, I always go back to the fundamentals. Be positive, keep going. Thanks to the ICB for everything they're providing to assist all bookkeepers. Seek help if you need it, and just look forward to a time when things change back to whatever normal is going to be.
Thanks for that, Paula. Yeah, I mean, we have to be very positive, and I always come across as if the whole world is just carrying on as per normal. I understand that some people are having a problem, and I'm talking to those, thankfully, that very small number of members that are struggling, and I am talking to people, and I'm trying to convince them that hang on in there, it isn't going to last forever, and your business will still be needed afterwards. And so, I like to think we've got a personal approach. I know you all help us. It's not just the team at head office, but they've been working brilliantly. I mean, all of our members, as you've seen with Amy coping with children crawling all over occasionally and all the rest of it, we've got a couple of our team that are doing that as well. But we keep trying. Claire, you're not on council, but you are definitely one of the people that we come across regularly, and you do quite a lot with ICB. What is your message to your fellow members?
I think one of the things that I sometimes find when I come to summits, I feel quite daunted by, oh, I ought to have this in place and I need to have that. And just take your time, you know, don't feel daunted by it. Enjoy what you do. Make a list of what you still need to do. No practice is perfect. Mine definitely is not. And I don't think it ever will be. It's constantly evolving. So don't beat yourselves up about what you haven't done. You'll get there eventually, and then you'll evolve again. So don't feel daunted. Just keep enjoying what you do. And the tendency when you're running a business is you start to end up or becoming a manager, a leader, all those things. You end up doing less of what you actually enjoy. And we all came into this because we actually enjoy bookkeeping and we enjoy our clients. So just make sure you keep doing what you enjoy, and the rest will happen over time. And don't feel daunted by it, but just enjoy what you do and keep having a sense of fun and keep engaging with ICB. So I wish more members engaged. And if there's anything to come out of this environment we're currently in, it's that actually ICB has been able to engage with so many more people electronically, and that's really exciting. So yeah. Brilliant.
Tom, sponsor extraordinaire. I mean, we are very grateful to.
I'm putting that on my signature. Yeah.
What can you say to us as a parting gesture?
Yeah, I suppose for me, one of the themes that I notice when we're having conversations with bookkeepers is that often we get the feedback that I need to find time to look at this. You know, this is not, you know, going to lead me to immediate results. I need to find some time. What I would say is we're all faced with a challenging scenario at the moment, you know, certainly interesting times, but let's use this time productively, and let's find the time to look at automation and look at the future of how your business is going to look in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you know, whatever that may be. And just personally as well, I'm a big advocate of remaining positive as much as possible. So to echo what you said, Garry, and of course what you said as well, Paula, you know, we're all in this together. We're all just cracking on and getting through it, and you know, let's just try and get through it as best we can.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, you know, we do have some pretty good sponsors, and you know, you're way up there on the top of our list. I mean, the thing I think we enjoy about you, and I probably shouldn't say this, but you're genuinely nice people. Now, I find in life you can deal with all sorts of rubbish if you want to, but you know, at my time of life, I pick the people that we like working with, and you know, I'm fortunate that I can do that, and that's it really. We can do not only do we do COVID together, but you know, generally making the bookkeeper's life better is a joint goal. It's not just us, it's not just you, it is about working together. So I'm really
weigh in on that, because that's a really interesting you raised that, because that was a decision that we made as a company, yeah, in 2015, 2016, when we were really starting to scale and see AutoEntry adopted in the market. We sat back and said to ourselves, what is going to be part of our ethos and our company culture that we put out there? And it was exactly that. I remember being in our old boardroom in Dublin and saying, we're going to be the nice guys. That's what we're going to do.
Good.
So it's very interesting to say that.
Yeah, and one of the things that many members mentioned is the sheer banshee type scream from Brendan as he jumped up when he'd been announced as the winner of the Luca. So you know, that real enthusiasm, not just oh yeah.
Well, I have Mr. Luca here, so this one is from when myself and Brendan got it in 2017, and it sits on my desk because it was startups are very long and arduous journeys in many respects. And when we got our first one in 2017, for myself, Brendan, and the rest of the team, it was very special. So, yeah.
Any final note from you, Amy?
Well, that's it, really, other than it's humbling to be in the presence of all of these Luca Award winners. So just congratulations. And of course, that we award those at the Bookkeepers Summit. So we jolly well better be out of this so that we can give some real life Luca Awards away to some other successful people.
And we had a meeting earlier this week. We're already talking about next year's summit, because next year will be our 25th anniversary. So we hope everybody's got nice deep pockets for that one.
I'm coming back for that one. I'm flying home for that one.
Great.
Well, with all the business building, so with all the business building people are doing, by next year they should have some substantial funds.
Absolutely. I've learned 2 new phrases today anyway. Vanity metrics, faffy functionality. We'll miss out the reference to tarts and everything else. So thank you today for coming along. Thank you to everybody that's been listening. And the thing about these things is you have so much enjoyment on screen, you kind of forget that there's 500 or 600 people listening into this. So we've not neglected any of you. I hope you've derived a great deal of benefit from this. Don't forget, tomorrow it's Thank Furlough, it's Friday again, and we'll be doing a catch up with everything. There are a few things that have been announced, and I think there's some more announcements coming out that either have just come out or are likely to come out. Who knows what they're going to be, but catch up with that tomorrow. So thank you all very much, guys. Bye, and thank you for your time.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.